We now move to the next part of financial management under Unit 2, and we talk about valuation of common stocks now. So far, we were looking at valuation of bonds and how does the cash flow get discounted to arrive at the current present value of the bond and thereby find the bond's price. We are now going to replicate a similar process to the pricing of common shares or stocks or equities of a company. Now, broadly, equity of a company is nothing but a sort of a profit-sharing agreement where someone has given money to the company and they have a part ownership in the company to the extent of what number of shares do they hold in the company, right? So, unlike a bondholder only has claim to the specific portion of the coupon payment that is going to come. The equity holder, on the other hand, has a claim to broadly the proportionate share of profits that are there in the company, right? So we'll try and value the company's stock now using similar principles that we have learned so far under the present value concept of finance, right? There are a few topics that will follow. We'll talk about valuation of common stocks. We'll talk about various cases and try and build a case for discounted cash flow models. What are the various scenarios that come up? We'll start with the simplest of scenarios and then try and kind of increase the complexity or remove the assumptions that we take. Then we also talk about something called as price to earnings multiple, which is a case of essentially relative valuation. And then we talk about the discount rates in this case. So unlike bonds where the discount rates are kind of evident in terms of market interest rates, here the discussion on discount rates also kind of becomes a little bit more complicated. Some part of that we'll cover at this point of time at this juncture in our curriculum. Subsequent units of our curriculum will also talk about this discount rate in more details. Right. So let's first try and kind of understand the concept of raising money via common stocks. So far, we were considering that a company is raising money using some kind of loan, right? Some kind of loan or borrowing or debt. Now we are extending this analysis to companies raising money via ownership in the company, right? So this brings in a new set of securities called stocks or shares, as they are commonly called. Why are they called shares? Because simply put, a 10% share in the company means a 10% entitlement to the profits and assets and everything that the company owns, essentially, right? So if this is the company's profits and if I own 10% of the share of the companies, this part of the profit is mine, right? The company may choose to give it to me at that point of time or might choose to give it to me at a later point of time, but practically this part of the company's earnings is entitled to me essentially, right? Now that's where a lot of the interesting premise on equities comes in. The company is issuing stocks as securities as well. There must be a similar way of valuing them, right? All we need to find out is if we do get a set of cash flows from these equities or stocks or shares, as we call them interchangeably, and then we could discount these cash flows. So that should be the logical modus operandi or way of valuing a stock as well, right? We need to find out that if someone holds this security, what is the cash flow that will come to them? Now, once someone holds a security, whether it is a stock or a bond, we are not bothered about what is the kind of the security that is there. All we are bothered about is what cash flows come out of it and what is the expected return out of that security, based on which I should arrive at a particular price that someone should be willing to pay as a buyer of this particular security, right? So practically speaking, if the company makes a payout every year, this is the cash flow that will accrue to that needs to be evaluated every year, that will accrue to the shareholder, right? The value of the common stock should thus be the present value of the cash flows that the company gives for its period of existence. Let's say it exists for n years. Every year the company might give out some cash flow. Every year there is an expected rate of return that is there, I have to discount it to find the present value of all these set of cash flows, and that present value when added together will give me the price, just like our bond concept, right? In the bonds case, this cash flow in the numerator was the coupon rate, the discount rate was the yield that I wanted from a bond, and N was the maturity of the bond. Here, whatever cash flow the company gives is the cash flow that we take. The rate of return is the expected rate of return from the company's stock or stock price. And finally, the number of years of existence of the company. Now, there are a few issues or complications that arise when you're evaluating a stock as against a bond, right? What are these issues? Issue one is that unlike a bond where these cash flows are kind of fixed because they are coupon payments, the numerator in the equation is fixed, the cash flows in equities are not fixed. Rather, you have to project them or actually find out what these cash flows would be. We don't know what these cash flows would be upfront. In the case of a fixed income security, the name fixed income suggests that the income or the cash flow every year is kind of fixed. So to that extent, it's easier to value a fixed income security. Here, there is going to be some sort of a projection of the cash flows, which will involve a little bit of advanced techniques as we go along. We'll start with the simplest of techniques, and then as we continue graduating in finance, then we'll probably learn more about some of these concepts on evaluating and projecting cash flows of a company. To the expectation of returns, this R is not as simple as fixed income. In fixed income, all this R needs to be is the yield to maturity of a particular kind of a bond. And for a similar bond, you'll have a similar return expectation. So for all practical purposes, the R is fairly well defined. In the case of equities, however, it becomes a little bit more complicated because your choice versus my choice, your expectation from a company versus my expectation from another company is not so easily replicable. There are a variety of factors that affect the expected returns in a particular company, right? Expected returns is a function of a variety of things in the company and not just the fact that two AAA rated bonds will have similar expected returns. Here, two AAA rated companies or companies with AAA rated bonds may still have different expected returns expectation from their equities, right? And that's where it becomes a little bit more tricky. Third, unlike fixed income securities, where there is a defined maturity, the cash flows may not be finite in equities. So there is possibly no definite maturity, right? A company might exist to infinity. So it's quite possible that there is no definite maturity of a particular set of cash flows. Here, we are assuming that it ends at year end. That's not necessarily true in all the cases. So as we go along, these are some of the challenges that we will face. We will start with the simplest mechanism of trying to value a company and the stock price and what kind of return we can make out of that company. And then we will slowly remove all the basic assumptions that we have made to arrive at a point where the cash flows are not fixed, where expectations become a little bit more complicated, and more importantly, the cash flows may not be finite. You could have a company existing till infinity, in which case you have to basically find out the cash flow in the infinite tier and discount it with 1 plus r raised to the power infinity. Now that becomes difficult because mathematically it's not possible to divide, to find that value. So we'll have to kind of simplify our analysis as we go along, use some assumptions in this entire process, and thereby try and arrive at the stock price of a company.